Imagine this. You're Europe, it's winter, and your gas bill looks scarier than a horror movie jump scare. You've cut off Russia, Nord Stream is basically an underwater crime scene, and suddenly, bam, a landlocked country in West Africa, best known in Western media for sand, coups, and uranium, just looked you dead in the eye and said, "No gas for you." Yep, Niger, not Germany, not France, not some G7 powerhouse. Niger, the place Western powers used to treat like a side note, just flexed harder than a bodybuilder on pre-workout. And this isn't some minor tantrum. It's a move that could rattle the entire Western Bloc like a Jenga tower during an earthquake. Here's the headline you probably missed between TikTok dances and Elon Musk's latest meltdown. Niger shut down gas exports, and in doing so, they might have just put Europe's energy security on life support. Why is that a big deal? Because Europe's been desperately hunting for a plan B ever since Russia turned off the tap. They thought Africa was that plan B, cheap gas, new pipelines, fresh deals, easy, right? Well, Niger just turned that plan B into plan broke. Let's rewind the tape. For decades, France, the US, and their European buddies treated Niger like a chess piece on a dusty Sahel board. Uranium here, aid packages there, and oh yeah, constant lectures about democracy. But here's the twist. While Western leaders were busy wagging fingers, Niger's new military rulers were quietly plotting a counter-move so slick it makes Netflix thrillers look boring. See, when ECOWAS, that's basically West Africa's HOA, but with tanks, started threatening invasion after Niger's coup, everyone thought General Abdurrahmane Chiani would fold. Spoiler, he didn't. Instead, he kept his mouth shut, bulked up his defenses, and then pulled the gas card. The result? France is sweating, Nigeria's fuming, Europe is panicking, and the rest of Africa? They're watching like it's the season finale of Who Wants to Humiliate the West? But this is just the surface, because the gas shutdown isn't just about Niger saying, "Nah, we're good." It's about leverage. It's about showing that for once, Africa has the power to make Europe beg, not the other way around. And trust me, this story goes way deeper than just cooking gas. It's about pipelines, sanctions, backroom deals, and a geopolitical plot twist nobody saw coming. So buckle up, because Section 2 is where we meet the man behind the curtain. The general who went from unknown officer to thorn in Europe's side in record time. And let's just say, Chiani doesn't play checkers. He plays 4D chess with the board on fire. So who's the man at the center of this gas-fueled drama? General Abdurrahmane Chiani. And let's be real, before 2023, most people outside Niger couldn't pick him out of a police lineup. Western media barely mentioned him, and when they did, it was usually with that trademark mix of confusion and condescension. Another African officer seizing power. Yawn, next headline please. But here's the kicker. While the world was dismissing him, Chiani was quietly flipping the script. He didn't scream into microphones. He didn't do the whole dictator parade in sunglasses with 10 golden medals. Nope, he went quiet. Dead quiet. And in politics, silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Think of it like poker. Everyone else at the table, France, ECOWAS, the US, they were slamming chips, bluffing invasions, threatening sanctions. Meanwhile, Chiani, he just sat there, face unreadable, waiting for the exact moment to throw down the ace. And that ace was gas. Here's what makes Chiani dangerous to the West. He understands leverage. He knew from day one that Niger isn't just some forgotten desert. It's a crossroads. Uranium that lights up France's nuclear plants. Niger. Pipelines that Europe drools over. Niger. And now, with one flick of his pen, he turned cooking gas exports into a geopolitical weapon. That's not random. That's calculated. And let's not forget, this guy wasn't born yesterday. Chiani has been deep in Niger's military intelligence circles for years. He knows how the game is played, because he's been the guy in the shadows, watching others fumble it. So when he stepped into the spotlight after the coup, he already had the playbook ready. Of course, Western leaders underestimated him. They thought, oh, another junta? We'll sanction them, pressure them, maybe send in ECOWAS to scare them, and boom, back to business as usual. What they didn't see coming was a man who didn't flinch, didn't back down, and actually had something to hit back with. Here's the genius of Chiani's silence. While ECOWAS was setting deadlines, while France was drafting angry press releases, while Nigeria's Tinubu was begging Parliament for invasion powers, Chiani just waited. Then bam, he shut off the gas tap like flipping a switch in his kitchen. Suddenly, it wasn't Niger on the defensive, it was Europe choking on the smell of its own energy panic. And this silence-turned shockwave sent a message not just to Europe, but to the entire continent. Africa doesn't always need to shout to be heard. Sometimes, one cold move is louder than 1,000 speeches. Now don't get it twisted. Chiani isn't playing hero here. He's not some Robin Hood in fatigues. He's playing for survival, for power, and for a seat at the global table where Africa usually gets the crumbs. But the way he's playing, that's what makes him the most dangerous man in the Sahel right now. And if you think cutting off cooking gas to Nigeria was wild, just wait. Because Section 3 is where we dive into Niger's first direct strike. Hitting Nigeria right where it hurts, its kitchens, its cars, and its pride. This wasn't just a policy move, it was a punch to the gut. Stay tuned, because in the next section, we'll unpack how one shutdown turned into a firestorm that sent Nigeria's economy wobbling, Tinubu scrambling, and ECOWAS sweating bullets. All right, let's talk about Niger's opening move in this geopolitical boxing match. Spoiler, it wasn't subtle. While ECOWAS was busy drafting angry communiques and President Tinubu was flexing like a gym bro about to skip leg day, Niger's junta basically said, "Cool story, bro, no more gas for you." Boom. Just like that, Niger suspended all liquefied petroleum gas exports, the very same cooking gas that Nigerian households depend on daily. Let that sink in. This wasn't a symbolic slap. This was like unplugging the microwave in the middle of someone's dinner. See, Nigeria may be Africa's biggest economy, but here's the twist. It's hooked on Niger's gas. Back in 2020, both countries even signed a memorandum of understanding. Fancy words for, we're gonna be besties in energy trade. It was supposed to be a win-win, a smooth partnership. But fast forward to today, that partnership looks like a messy divorce where one side just changed the Wi-Fi password. And here's why this hurts. Nigerians don't use LPG as some weekend luxury. It's the everyday stuff. Cooking, heating, sometimes even transportation. So when Niger shut off the tap, prices in Nigeria shot up like Elon Musk's ego, from 750 naira per kilogram to over 1,000 naira almost overnight. That's not inflation, that's highway robbery with receipts. Tinubu, already under fire for cutting fuel subsidies, suddenly found himself with angry citizens, skyrocketing prices, and a neighbor that wasn't backing down. And the best part? Niger didn't even try to sugarcoat it. Officials in Niamey flat out said, "Sorry, not sorry. We'll sell gas only if there's leftover after we meet our own needs." Translation: Nigeria, you're not special anymore. Let's add insult to injury. While Nigeria was scrambling, Niger was actually upgrading. Their governor of Niger State, Mohamed Bago, proudly unveiled 200 shiny new buses powered by compressed natural gas. Imagine that flex. "Oh, you can't get our gas for your kitchens? No problem. We'll fuel our buses with it and drive them right past your border, ouch." And it wasn't just buses. Niger rolled out contracts for over 566 kilometers of new road networks and even cut deals with rice plants to buy directly from farmers. Translation: while Nigeria was drowning in economic headaches, Niger was reinvesting its gas leverage into actual infrastructure. If this were a rap battle, that's called a mic drop. Now here's the plot twist that makes this personal. President Tinubu was the loudest voice calling for ECOWAS to invade Niger. He thought tough talk would scare Niamey into submission. Instead, Niger turned around and gave him a thank you gift: higher gas prices and angry citizens back home. That's not just strategy, that's savagery. And the symbolism is golden. Nigeria cutting electricity to Niger. Niger cuts off gas in return. It's like watching two neighbors fight by turning off each other's utilities. Oh, you turned off my lights? Cool, no soup for you. But here's where it escalates. The gas war wasn't just about hitting Nigeria, it was a warning shot to Europe. Because if Niger can shake Nigeria, the West's biggest puppet in the region, what happens if they point that same energy weapon at Europe's precious pipelines? That's the billion-euro question. And lucky for you, Section 4 is where we pull back the curtain on the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, a mega project that Europe is drooling over, but Niger just turned into a hostage situation. So grab some popcorn, because next up, we'll talk about how one dusty pipeline running through the Sahara might decide whether Europe keeps the lights on or freezes in the dark. So far, Niger's gas shutdown has been like watching a neighbor cut off your Netflix password. Annoying, painful, but survivable. But now, let's talk about the nuclear option. The Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, or as I like to call it, Europe's please don't freeze plan. Here's the backstory. Back in the 1970s, someone had a bright idea. Hey, let's build a pipeline straight from Nigeria's massive gas reserves, snake it through Niger, push it into Algeria, and boom, deliver African gas directly into Europe's hungry grid. It sounded genius. Less reliance on Russia, more partnership with Africa. Fast forward a few decades, and billions of dollars in feasibility studies later, and the project finally started looking real. The pipeline is supposed to be a monster, 4,100 kilometers long, crossing scorching deserts, carrying up to 30 billion cubic meters of gas every year. Think of it as an energy superhighway. About 1,000 kilometers in Nigeria, 840 kilometers in Niger, and a whopping 2,300 kilometers in Algeria. Once the gas hits Algeria's Hassi Armel hub, it can zip right into Europe through existing Mediterranean pipelines. Sounds neat, right? But here's the catch. Without Niger, the whole thing collapses. The pipeline literally has to run through Niger's land. No Niger, no gas. It's like trying to build a bridge, but forgetting who owns the riverbank. And here's where Niger's junta just flexed harder than the rock in a tank top. When Europe and ECOWAS started threatening invasion after the coup, Niamey basically said, "Try it, and watch us shut down this pipeline dream before." It even leaves the drawing board. That's not a bluff. That's the kind of threat that makes energy ministers in Paris choke on their croissants. Remember, Europe is still reeling from Russia's gas divorce. Nord Stream? Gone. Cheap Russian pipelines? History? And the EU's energy bills? Let's just say they're scarier than German techno at 3 a.m. So Europe desperately needs the Trans-Saharan Pipeline. Without it, they're stuck scrambling for expensive LNG imports, begging Qatar, and fighting each other for whatever scraps the global market has left. And Niger? Niger is standing at the center of the map, arms crossed, saying, "You need us more than we need you." That's a seismic shift. For once, Africa isn't the supplier on a leash, it's the gatekeeper holding the keys. And don't think Europe hasn't noticed. Suddenly, Algeria's pushing for peace talks, Nigeria's barking less, and even France is lowering its voice, because they know Niger could tank the whole $13 billion project with a single no. Here's the irony that stings Europe the most. They spent decades lecturing Africa about good governance and stable institutions while hoarding the continent's resources. But now, their precious energy security depends on, wait for it, a military junta in Niamey. That's like firing your mechanic and then begging him to fix your car on the highway. And it gets better. Niger hasn't just threatened to shut down the pipeline. They've dangled it like bait. Russia's Gazprom, India's Gale, even Italy's ENI are circling like vultures, ready to step in if Europe fumbles. Translation: Europe's not just competing with Niger's politics, it's competing with Russia and China for influence over Africa's gas future. So what happens when a landlocked African country suddenly holds the thermostat to Europe's winter? Simple. The panic spreads. And that brings us straight into Section 5. Because when Niger played the pipeline card, ECOWAS, Nigeria, and France didn't sit quietly. They started sharpening swords, cutting electricity, and whispering the three scariest words in geopolitics: military intervention possible. And trust me, that's when this gas war started looking less like a trade dispute and more like a powder keg. So, Niger shuts off gas, flexes on Nigeria, and hints it could nuke Europe's pipeline dreams. Naturally, the West's favorite enforcer in Africa, ECOWAS, steps onto the stage. And when I say steps, I really mean stomps in with the grace of an elephant trying to salsa dance. Within days of the coup, ECOWAS, led by Nigeria's president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, dropped the hammer. Trade sanctions, financial freezes, and, the big one, restore the president in 7 days or face military intervention. 7 days. Like Niger was a teenager grounded for bad behavior. But Niamey didn't panic. Instead, they basically shrugged and said, "Do your worst." And here's where the gloves came off. Nigeria decided to flex by cutting 70% of Niger's electricity supply. Think about that. More than 2/3 of Niger's power gone in an instant. Lights out in Niamey. Fans dead in the Sahel heat. Hospitals running on fumes. That was supposed to bring the junta to its knees. Instead, Niger doubled down. They told their citizens, "We'll survive. We always have." But Nigeria's about to feel some real pain. Remember, by this point, the LPG cutoff was already squeezing Tinubu's economy like a python in a chokehold. Meanwhile, ECOWAS started moving its chess pieces. Military chiefs from across West Africa gathered in Abuja, whispering about troop deployments. Reports leaked of a potential standby force being prepped, and every media outlet went nuts with headlines about imminent invasion. But here's the catch. Niger wasn't standing alone. Mali and Burkina Faso, two other junta-led neighbors, jumped in with the ultimate ride-or-die move. Their message was crystal clear. If you attack Niger, you attack us. And we will treat it as a declaration of war. Translation. What looked like a surgical strike risked turning into a full-blown regional war. 3 Sahel countries against ECOWAS, dragging in outside players like Russia, France, and maybe even the US in the chaos. Suddenly, ECOWAS realized they weren't just threatening Niger, they were poking at a hornet's nest the size of the Sahara. And speaking of outside players, Moscow didn't waste time. The Russian Foreign Ministry went full Cassandra, warning that any invasion would set off a protracted conflict destabilizing the entire Sahel. That's diplomat speak for, go ahead, try it, and watch Africa burn. Meanwhile, in the streets of Niamey, supporters of the coup gathered near French military bases, waving Russian flags and chanting, "Down with France, down with ECOWAS." It wasn't just a political crisis anymore, it was turning into a showdown of symbols. France's tricolor versus Russia's double-headed eagle. And France? Oh, France was panicking. For years they treated Niger like their uranium ATM, and now their soldiers were stuck in the middle of protests, surrounded by people who wanted them gone yesterday. Macron, never one to whisper, demanded Bazoum's reinstatement, while quietly realizing, without Niger's uranium and pipeline access, France's energy strategy was shakier than a Parisian croissant tower. So ECOWAS found itself in a bind. push too hard, and risk igniting a war that would drag half the continent into chaos. Do nothing, and watch Niger, and maybe the entire Sahel, slip out of Western control forever. And while the Bloc hesitated, Niger played its cards beautifully. The gas shutdown wasn't just an economic strike, it was psychological warfare. It showed ECOWAS that sanctions weren't going to make Niamey blink. If anything, it made the junta dig in deeper. But here's where the story goes global. Because when a landlocked African nation can trigger sanctions, black out an economy, and still hold the line, the world starts paying attention. Russia saw opportunity, the US smelled trouble, and Europe started sweating bullets, realizing that its African Plan B might be dead before it even started. And that takes us straight into Section 6, because this isn't just a Niger versus Nigeria spat anymore. It's Niger versus the Western Bloc, with Moscow, Washington, and Paris all circling like vultures over a desert feast. So strap in. Next up, we'll break down how this tiny Sahel showdown sent shockwaves from Brussels to Washington to Moscow, and why Niger might have just punched way above its weight class. Here's the wild part. Niger's gas shutdown didn't just rattle Nigeria. It sent shockwaves across the globe. Russia jumped in first, warning ECOWAS that invading Niger would spark chaos for decades. Translation: please poke the hornet's nest. We'll happily watch the fallout. Cue Nigerian crowds waving Russian flags outside French bases, basically telling Paris, your time is up. The US tried to play it cool, condemning the coup, but quietly panicking about losing its drone bases and watching Wagner mercenaries sniff around. For Washington, Niger isn't about democracy, it's about strategy. France? Oh, France is sweating bullets. Its nuclear plants depend on Niger's uranium, and now its troops are surrounded by protesters shouting, "Down with France!" Macron wanted Bazoum back, but deep down, he knows the colonial leash has snapped. And Europe as a whole, they're the real losers here. After ditching Russian gas, Europe pinned its hopes on Africa's pipeline. But Niger just grabbed that pipeline like a hostage and told Brussels, beg harder. Suddenly, Africa isn't the desperate supplier, it's the gatekeeper. Now the bigger picture, Niger isn't acting alone. Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, all are rewriting the rules. It's not just coups, it's a revolt against dependency. For once, Africa has leverage, and the West knows it. So here's the million-dollar question. Did Niger just gamble with its future? Or did it light the fuse for Africa's independence? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe if you love no-fluff breakdowns like this. And remember, sometimes the smallest players flip the whole game. And Niger, they just made Europe shiver.